Welcome to the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. Today we have a new guest on our podcast with us. It's Ruth Holcomb from the Santa Cruz Hit Squad. What's up, Ruth? How are you?
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm good. Just enjoying the end of my off season,
Yeah, I'm packing it full of school. That's your
Yeah.
off season.
Yeah, true. Not much of an off season, honestly.
Ruth is a student at University of California, Santa Barbara. She also, at the same time, like I said, is a member of the Santa Cruz Hit Squad, won the U23 Lifetime Grand Prix Series this year, which is awesome because, Ruth, you did not start in gravel. You started in XCO and short track, and now you're doing this long stuff. It's
Yeah.
awesome. So I'm stoked to have Ruth on here because we've had some questions specifically for Ruth. We're going to talk about specifically today, we're going to get into periodization and managing periods of intensity in your training. Right now is a time where a lot of athletes are laying out their training for the coming year. So hopefully we can give you some really good insights on how to lay out your training so that you can be fast when it matters and then not be too broken down and burnt out when you push beyond that. So hopefully we can make that happen. We're also going to talk a bit about strategy of like how to adjust training for long durations versus short durations. It's going to be a good one. But first, the rapid fire questions, Ruth, the most important ones. We're going to run through a handful of them now. Traditional VO2 max intervals, like the 3 to 5 minute sort of things, or 30-30s. What do you prefer?
Ooh. I mean, I definitely prefer like traditional VO2, but like I think for like what I need to work on most, 30-30s are like more prevalent in my training. So I would rather do a traditional one though.
This is interesting. This is supposed to be rapid fire. We're totally not going to go rapid fire. One would expect that because you have a background in like cross country Olympic, that you just like naturally are like punchy and prefer these on-off style efforts. Is that not the case?
I think that the thing about the on-off is, well, I guess it depends kind of how, like, the goal of the 30-30s. Like, most of my 30-30s are, like, you also have a set minimum for those rest periods, and so I think that's really hard for me is, like, I can do any like, 30 seconds, great, I love a 30-second interval, but it's kind of like that 30-second rest where you have to hold the minimum and then go back up, and, like, that's the part that, like, I really struggle with, so I think I don't really love that. I'd way rather just be given, like, all right, 2-3 minutes, like, go all out, and then you get, like, no minimum, like, for the rest. So I think that's kind of the part that I struggle with the most, but,
the rest part.
yeah,
Yeah.
the rest part.
Man, not enough cyclists focus on that, right? Have you noticed that? Like,
No,
in a lot of
definitely.
cases, they
I
just
mean,
kind of chill during in
it's
between
so
intervals.
interesting because, like, I used to just chill between intervals and then, like, kind of just one time I had this workout and it was, like, 30 seconds all out, 30 seconds back down to tempo, and, like, that was, like, the hardest workout I've ever done, and that's when I kind of realized, like, oh, like, you're given a power for the rest for a reason because it's not just, like, in a race, you're not just, like, going all out and then coasting, you're, like, going all out and then bringing it back down to, like, a different power, So I think, like, it is really important to, like, make sure you have the rest at the correct power too.
Yeah, in some workouts, it will be intentionally low because we
Mhm.
want you to go as high as you possibly can or something for the actual intervals. But in some situations, like the rest is just as important. I see a lot of people also just on timing of the rest. They're kind of like, it's fine. And there are situations where it is fine. Like it doesn't really matter the time in between your intervals that much, and you
Mhm.
can stretch it out. But sometimes, especially as you get in closer to your goal events, typically, and if it's like higher in intensity and shorter in duration, chances are the rest duration and intensity matters more.
Oh,
Like,
for sure.
and if you just allow yourself to just go again once you feel fresh, racing is going to really hurt because I've never once heard a field respond to me saying, "Hey, everyone, can we slow down for a bit?"
Yeah. No, they don't
Doesn't
really do
work.
that, no.
No, they don't. They don't. Okay, socks over or socks under your leg
De
warmers or tights.
Definitely under. I think I've always been an under person, but then even being on Hit Squad, like, at team camp, they were like, "If you put him over, like, you're done. That's it. You're fired."
That
So,
had to have been Keegan, huh?
yeah, it was
Yeah, yeah.
Keegan, yep.
Yep, yep. Tobin and I like to wear our socks over purely just to spite Keegan.
Yes,
So,
I know.
yeah.
I've seen that. Yeah, I don't think it's still not for me. It's kind of spiting me at this point too, but, what
Oh man. He's had too much influence on you. Breakaway or sprint finish? Which would you
Um,
prefer?
I mean, a breakaway is nice because you don't have to worry about the sprint, but I'm like, I've got a pretty good sprint. I guess if I'm, like, in a crit, probably a breakaway, but if I'm, like, doing XCO or short track or one of these long events, I, like, can normally bet that my, like, sprint power and sprint is gonna be better than whoever I'm with. So, I think a sprint for me for the most part.
What's peak power like for you? Being a young athlete coming like it and you still have years to develop, of course. Like, do you know what your peak power is? That something you pay attention to?
Yeah, I think, like, my peak 5 second is, like, 10:50 about. I think
Whew.
yeah, it's pretty I've got a pretty decent sprint. I haven't hit that this year, I don't think. Like, I think, like, my training has definitely shifted me more, like, a little lower, but, when I was doing a lot of the track stuff, and, like, short track XCO, I had a pretty good sprint on me for a while there, so, yeah.
Which track events did you do?
Mostly just the team pursuit. Like, I mean, a lot of different training around the team pursuit, but, yeah, I mean, to get, like, that massive gear off the line and then, um yeah, just, like, hold on to that, like, you need to have, like, a decent amount of power on you for sure.
Just like last week's episode with Anders
Yep,
Johnson. That was
yeah.
good. So, yeah, there
Yeah,
we
I'm
go.
sure
Cool.
he
Yeah, yes, he has a bit of power to work with, that's for sure.
just a bit, yeah.
What's your favorite cross country Olympic race course of your career? Because you've raced all over with
Mhm.
cross country Olympics.
Ooh, I think, Nové Mesto in Czech Republic, it just, like honestly, like, a lot of the World Cups are just, like, straight up a hill for 5 minutes, and then you, like, go down. Nova Mesto's, like, a little different where it's, like, got a lot of hills. It's got, like, 3 or 4, like, shorter hills, and, like, the uphills are technical, the downhills are technical. If it rains, it's even more technical. There's a pump track in the course, and I, like, love pump tracks, and so, like, all of those pieces combined, it's, like there's not, like, a lot of World Cup courses that, like, suited me super well. I'd say a lot of the American courses suited me better with, like, the shorter, like, less steep climbs, but the Nova Mesto course is just kind of, like, my ideal course. Like, I if I could do every race for the rest of my life on that course, like, I would.
Yeah, it's a cool course. You're a never second athlete. Do you
Mhm.
prefer gels or drink mix?
Um, I I mean, I like them both, but the passion fruit gel is just, like, my favorite thing ever. Like, I could eat those all day, so I'd say gels.
I haven't tried that one. I just tried the berry caffeine one this weekend,
Oh, those are
and
pretty good.
I don't know how this happened. If like the B and the CH, it was a typo, but it tastes exactly like, or maybe it is the berry pie. It tastes like the berry pie filling that you get from those Hostess pies at a gas
Oh,
station.
crazy.
It tastes just like if you put that in your mind and you have that, it's gonna taste just like
Okay,
that
okay,
filling. It's kind of
I'll
wild.
keep that in mind next time I'm on the berry ones. But you should try
Yeah,
the passion
for
fruit, it's, like, life-changing, honestly, it's my favorite. If I'm
oh,
ever
okay,
trying to, like,
good.
get someone hooked on Never Second, I'm like, "Here's a passion fruit one, give it a try."
And they're stuck.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll try it. I'm gonna go for it. Uh, do you highest FTP of your career? A lot of your racing has probably not been like directly focused on like FTP, but do you know roughly like what it's been at like its high points?
Yeah, I think, like, probably the, like, fittest I've been, highest FTP-wise was, like, right when I moved to California. I was kind of, like, coming off a, like, decent XCO season. I'd also spent, like, a lot of my season on the road that year, and I think I was looking at, like, 285, 290 FTP at that point.
Whew. Yeah,
Yeah.
big. That's proper power. Uh, Best and worst course of the Lifetime Grand Prix after doing it
Ooh.
this year.
Um, I think best course, well, definitely Little Sugar. That's just, like, hands down, like, come on, mountain bikes, super fun, like, that's just hard to beat. Leadville also I liked, I thought it was, like, cool, maybe not the best, like, course. I think the out and back with, like, a bunch of people makes it a little tough, but, um, super cool. Worst? Mm I gotta go with Unbound. I mean, I only did the 100 even, but it just, like, wasn't for me. Like, I feel like a lot of people might answer Schwamigan for that one just because, like, you're on the grass, but, like, I loved that, like, punchy kind of, like, road racy vibe of that course, and I just think, like, Unbound, at least for me, like, didn't really have that much to offer, so, yeah.
It's like a race of attrition.
Exactly, yeah.
I wonder how much that'll change though with time you doing these long events. I wonder if like you'll start to like somehow like you can race
Yeah.
it
I
differently
mean,
and find a redeeming quality.
in theory, it's like a course that should suit me. Like I should be good at Unbound. I just think like mentally for me, like if a course doesn't have like some exciting things going on or like something that I can do that like gives me like a little leg up or something like that, like just those little things that like make it exciting, then I just like have a much harder time like racing them, I think. So, um,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, Over unders or hard starts? Which would you prefer?
Probably hard starts, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Ramp test or 20-minute test?
Ramp test, I think. I like
Yeah.
do you know, like, the pacer tests that you, like, used to have to do in, like, elementary school where you, like, run with the beeps and the beeps get faster? Like, that was, like, my
Yes.
favorite thing ever in elementary school, and so a ramp test kind of, like, reminds me of that, and, like, I just think it's fun to, like, do that.
I'm gonna think of that. Hopefully, it makes ramp tests
Yeah.
more enjoyable in the future. Hardtail or full suspension?
Full suspension. I don't think I've ridden a hardtail since, like, mm, 2021, so, yeah.
Nice, nice.
Mhm.
And for those that don't know, Ruth also rode Transcascadia this year,
I
which
did.
is like a multi-day blind enduro point-to-point crazy adventure. We talked about it with Tobin on the podcast. So Ruth covers the broad spectrum of cycling events, from track cycling, cross country, gravel, even enduro stuff. So, mid-ride gas station stop, what are you grabbing?
Definitely some Skittles. I love Skittles. A blue
I haven't
Gatorade.
had that answer before.
Really, I feel like that's
Yeah.
I mean, they're a pretty good bang for your buck, like, carbs-wise, and I feel like they're pretty easy to eat. Um, yeah, blue Gatorade, and then probably some sort of, like, Reese's or, like, chocolate something. Gotta balance it out, with yeah.
Yes, for health.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
health reasons,
exactly. Yeah.
obviously, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's been the hardest race day of your career so far?
Ooh, honestly, I think it was my first race this year with Hit Squad. It was Belgian Waffle, Scottsdale, and it was before I joined Hit Squad, I had ridden my bike 100 miles, like, twice before, and so I was, like, really fresh. I also came off, like, a season of, like I didn't race or, like, train for 8 months. I was just kind of like, "I'm done." I got a concussion, and I just, like, was kinda done. So I was really just coming back, really trying to figure out this whole nutrition thing. It was super new to the whole, like, thing. I'd been in California, which is, like, sort of warm, but it was a really warm day in Scottsdale. I had a great first, like, 50, 60 miles, and then after that, I just was like, I didn't drink enough water, was just so bonked, and, like, literally counting, like, .1 of a mile to, like, the next spot. I, like, got to my mechanic, Myron, like, stopped for a while, drank some water, but I was like, "This is my first race with this team. I, like, have to finish this bike race," and just, like, limped it in. It was I think that, like, it was so hard, and I was like, "What have I gotten myself into?" And ended up pulling it together and figuring it out, but, yeah, it was a really hard day.
Who's had the most impact on you throughout your career from a training or performance perspective?
I'd say my current coach, Kristen Armstrong. I just think, like, not only, like, is she my coach and, like, has, like, really transformed the way I think about bike racing and helped me, but she just is, like, such an out of the box thinker, like, got me on the road bike, got me on the track bike, is, like, willing to pivot and help me, like, with anywhere I go, and she is just, like, one of the most creative people in, like, developing, like, different racecraft skills and things like that, and so I just think, like, learning from her, like, there's so much more to racing than just, like, who's the fittest, and also so much more to, like, training and being a good cyclist than, like, doing your training plan every day, and so I just think, like, working with her has been, like, so next level, and she also just, like, one of the, like, kindest people and, like, is just, like, helped me as, like, sort of my, like, second mom too, so she's just been super great.
That's awesome. Good stuff. Well, Becca sent in a question for you. She says, "Hey, Coach Jonathan, I love when you have Hannah Otto on the podcast, but had a request for another athlete, Ruth Holcomb. I'm sure you know this, but she's part of the hit squad and she won the U23 division of the Lifetime Grand Prix." Yep, we definitely know. I've followed Ruth's progress for quite a few years as our kids have raced cross country Olympic in North America. So I've seen her progressing from a teenager in short races to taking on the biggest gravel races in the world. I have a lot of questions for Ruth, but I'll try to distill it down to a few. The first one is, we still work with teens through NICA, and I'd love to get Ruth's tips on her advice for coaches and parents of young cyclists. What mistake has she experienced or seen, and what advice would she have for them? This could be a big topic, Ruth.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have like so much to say on the topic of just like NICA and like young racers, and like as someone who like as a first year like 15, 16 was just like, I want to do it all. I want it all. Like I'm going to train, I'm going to be the best. Like there's nothing nothing that's going to stop me. And like everyone was always like, "Oh, you have time, like be patient," and like I think that that is like the number one thing is like you have time, and there's like so much that can happen between like the time you like start racing NICA and like now, like it's such a big time frame. And I think it's really
And
important
NICA
that
is the National
yeah.
Interscholastic
Hmm.
Cycling Association. So that's going to be like middle school and high school aged mountain biking here in the United States. There's a whole national league. Sorry to
Hmm.
interrupt, Ruth. I
No,
just wanted to
you're
give
all
that
good. You're
context.
all good.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
think like this is kind of like cliche, but the number one thing is like you're out there having fun and you're having a good time and like building a community with the people that you're riding with. So I think like for like parents and coaches, like I think number one, like just make sure your kid is like having fun and loving it. And like if they want to go do these races, great. But if they just want to go ride with their friends, or like, oh, maybe they don't want to race XC, maybe they want to go race enduro, like awesome, let them go do that. If they like want to race, like support them in that too. But I think like number one should be just like making sure they have fun, because I also have seen a lot of racers that like came up and like in their U23 years all of a sudden just got super good and like did NICA for fun. So, like, I think, like, that's a big thing is just, like, what is your why? And, in Durango, we actually have, like, the Durango Devos, like, saying is never forget the feeling, and so it's kind of like, never forget the feeling of, like, your first, like, Devo practice, or, like, your first, like, time that you, like, rode a feature that you, like, were super scared about, and, like, that's kind of, like, your why of why you do it. And so I think just, like, helping these kids, like, make sure that they're doing it, like, because they wanna be there and, like, they're having fun. So just, like, supporting them no matter what part of cycling they wanna be a part of. And then I also think, like, on another level, just, like, I think it's important that they, like, if they wanna race, that they're, like, getting the support that they need. So, um, maybe not starting them on, like, a training plan until they're, like, 17 or 18 at least. Like, I don't think I had a structured, like, training plan. I didn't download Training Peaks or, like, upload my rides using a Garmin until I was 18 years old. So I think there's also, like, that piece of it where, like, you can start them too young and you can, like, burn them out. And, um, yeah, just, like, if they want that, like, support them, but also just kind of, like, slow them down a little bit. Like, I remember being so frustrated by my Debo coach, like, "Yeah, I just wanna go train, like, give me intervals, give me this," and, like, he, like, was awesome. He's like, "Alright, go do this Strava segment, and then ride until you find, like, 2 golf balls, and then call it a day." Like, just most random rides, and it, like, really frustrated me, but, like, that's just, like, it needs to be fun, and it needs to be, like, low pressure. So I think that's, like, kind of the most important.
Yeah. How would you respond to a parent that says, like, my kid just wants intervals, like, nonstop? Like, would you say it's okay for them to have that? And any other guidance there on what they should do if a kid really, really, really does want to train?
Yeah, I mean, I think that still falls under the category of, like, you should just support your kid with what they wanna do. I think there's, like, better ways to do it. I think, like, take them to, like, a local race that like, a weekly local race if it happens, or, like, I don't know, h hook them up with someone in the community that, like, can help them, like, go chase Strava segments. Um, Even, like, help them find a coach that is, like, gonna be super low key and kind of, like, guide them in the right direction. Like, yeah, if they really wanna do intervals, they really wanna do intervals, and there's, like, nothing you can do about it. That was, like, kind of like me, and, like, luckily, there's, like, so many, like, mentors in Durango that were there to, like, kind of guide me and, like, slow me down, bring me back down a little bit, you know? But, like, yeah, I think support them, but, like, try and do it in a way that's not just, like, go do intervals. It's, like, go on this, like, really cool, hard group ride, or, like, go chase some Strava segments, you know? So, um, I don't think it's bad that they wanna go do intervals. I just think, like, um there's, like, better ways to do it as, like, a young rider.
Mm. Becca's next question, transitioning from short track to cross country Olympic and to marathon, or from short track and cross country Olympic to marathon and gravel had to have been really challenging compared to an athlete that may have been more road focused in their junior years. Are there any benefits or drawbacks you experienced transitioning to longer distance events? So I think to simplify this one a bit, going from short to long, have you found your cross country Olympic roots and short track roots to be beneficial in any ways or a drawback in others?
I definitely think a bit of both. I think for one, you learn so much racecraft in like a short track and XCO, that is like super helpful. And also you have a punch that just like kind of stays with you that like never leaves. So I think I found that super useful, like Schwamigan, Little Sugar. Obviously the skills transfer over, which is also super helpful. Um, I would say that like I'm kind of like an entirely different rider than I was when I raced XCO. Like my training completely changed. I used to be like, oh yeah, give me 1 minute, give me 2 minutes, like give me maybe even 5 minutes, but that's a little long. And I will just like I just had like crazy short power. And then like this past year, it's been crazy. Like every time I've been given some sort of like VO2 or shorter workout, I've like really struggled and the long stuff has been better. So I think, yeah, like it definitely, like my body's changed a lot and like the way I train has changed a lot. Um, and it was like a really hard transition at first. And it took me until like probably Leadville to be like, oh, I actually like have made a transition and like this is like working. So I think it was like a really big transition. But I also like raced some XCO this year and went back and was like, oh, it's an hour. Like this is like so chill, you know? So I think there's like definitely benefits and drawbacks. It was a really hard transition and like kind of getting your body to like be able to like work for you for longer than 3 hours is like a crazy thing to do. But there's definitely like also like the benefits. Like I won my sprint at Schwamigan and like had no trouble like on those little punchy hills, and Little Sugar I was like riding the top 5 until I flatted, like just based off of skills alone, you know? So I think that there's benefits to both, and like I just think overall being like a well-rounded cyclist helps too. So
Were the long intervals and like the big long days hard at first? And if so, what did you do to make them more manageable?
yeah, they were really hard. I think also I once again, like I was coming off of 8 months of not like training anyway, so that made it even harder. Um, it really helped to have friends out there with me. So, like riding with people, I think is a big one for like at least those longer days. Um, the longer intervals, honestly, like they were just kind of like a grind for a while. And I think that like the only thing that you can tell yourself sometimes when things are like hard like that is like, well, it's not going to get any easier if I don't go out and do them, you know? Like I'd like have these like long like tempo threshold blocks and like they'd be really hard, but then the next week they'd be a lot easier because I like did them last week. And so I think there's just also that piece of like you just have to go do the work. And it's not always going to just be like, oh, like just intervals today. It's gonna be like, oh, intervals today. Like this is a job, you know?
Attaching like a vision and a goal beyond just
Yeah,
like getting through the next interval, and instead
for
like there's
sure.
a whole purpose behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah. This what you said is interesting about the short stuff and the long stuff. It really proves the fact that we're good at what we do most.
Mhm.
And I think that maybe that's misunderstood by a lot of athletes commonly, where they think that they're just, no, I'm no matter what, I'm really good at X or Y. And while
Yes,
we do have probably some sort of facility that's built into us because of what we've done for years, at the same time, it's really impressive to see how an athlete can completely shift their profile, and be good at the long stuff, even
for
after they've been
sure.
really good at the short stuff.
Yeah, I
Is
mean,
there anything that
I
go
was just
ahead,
gonna
sorry.
say, like, if you would have told me, like, 2023, like, "Oh, yeah, like, you're gonna prefer, like, a 20-minute climbing interval over these, like, flat, like, 1-minuters," I'd be like, "No, I will not." Like, you're just so wrong about that, and it is just crazy to see, like, that transition.
Any nutrition changes or pacing, position changes, anything else that made the longer intervals or longer days easier for you?
Yeah, I think all of the above on that front. I think, uh like, on nutrition, for starters, like, XCO, it is still important, and I think they're getting to the point where they're, like, having these, like, high carb, um, like diets when they train and race, but I like when I was racing XCO like last, like pretty seriously in 2023, like I'd like maybe bring a gel, have some drink mix in a bottle, be really proud of myself if I ate my gel, you know, sort of like an emotional support gel. Um, but then like when I started getting into this, like I remember the comment on my Training Peaks that was like, normally in these endurance events, people are eating 90 to 100 grams of carbs per hour. We need to start training that. And I literally like started pulling gels out and like looking at how many carbs are in one. And I was like, what do you mean I'm going to eat like 3 of these an hour? Like there's no way I'm going to do that. So that was like a whole thing for me of like figuring that out and training your gut. And that like takes a lot of time. And then also pacing because like, I don't know if you like, I mean, maybe Becca has seen me race an XCO, but I am like the number one offender of going out so hard, getting to the front of the race, like pushing the front and then just like hanging on for dear life. And that does not work in a gravel race. I learned pretty quickly. So I think also I learned a lot about how to like pace a bike race. And like you do only have so many matches. You can go over the edge. And so I think that's also been like something that I've really learned. And I think if I like went back to XCO, would like use that again. So I think pacing changes, nutrition changes, like I mean, I kind of like reinvented everything this year. Like it was just like the biggest learning year I've ever had for sure.
That's cool. That's something to be proud of for sure. Kenley sent in a question. Says, hello, Mr. Lee and the rest of the TrainerRoad staff. This is my first season using TrainerRoad, following being off the bike for 8 years of what started as a burnout and just evolved. I'm currently on the cyclocross plan. Following that plan has brought up my FTP from 181 to 239 watts at 165 pounds. Great work, Kenley. That's awesome. My question is, I find that in a cyclocross race in the Cat 4 field, I can put out power for about 3 to 4 laps, but then fade hard after that. Most of these races, by the way, looking at their files, which we're going to look at here in just a second, most of these races are typically going to be somewhere around 40 minutes for this athlete. I don't think it's a problem with the training plan, but more so that it may take more time training for me to build the needed endurance to be able to hang on for the whole race. Can you tell me if this is so, and what exactly happens to the body for me to be able to get there? I have a TrainerRoad account, so roast away if needed. We don't plan to roast, just get insight. I appreciate the work that the team is doing. I look forward to what's to come. Okay, so some great questions in here. I think we'll start off with looking actually at this athlete's ride files, and then we'll go into the other questions that they have beyond that as well. So then that way we can make sure that we're getting all the details and all like the different pieces of the puzzle here. So I think maybe the first thing to start with, and hopefully you can see everything on screen right now for this athlete's calendar. But I think I want to go into the race analysis side of things first. Let's look at an example of going out too hard and like pacing incorrectly. So if you look at this athlete's first 20 minutes of this race, you can see that they had a normalized power of 220, an average of 175, and then you can see the intensity breakdown per zone. So they had about 15% coasting, 27% in active recovery, 11% in endurance, only 6% in tempo, 4% in sweet spot, 6% in threshold, 9% in VO2 max, and then 22% in anaerobic, which it's cyclocross, so pretty miserably rough. But it's not unlike a cyclocross race to see somewhere around 20% anaerobic. But in this case, this one's quite polarized in the sense that you have hardly any VO2, almost all anaerobic, and then you have a lot on the coasting and active recovery and endurance side. Typically, you'll see like a decent amount of coasting, not much active recovery, but even less endurance in cyclocross. And then you won't see too much tempo in most courses, but then once you get to like sweet spot to threshold, you start to see things ramp up. And with really good cyclocross racers, they're like a bit more stable. When we look at the second half of this athlete's race, remember we had 220 NP for the first 20 minutes. But then if we look at roughly the last 20-ish minutes, we see that the MP drops down to a 181 with 154 on their average power. And the biggest thing that we see is that now there's only 11% anaerobic, and instead it's much more evenly spread out throughout. When we look at these laps too, Ruth, like we see these climbs that they have, and man, when we look at this first lap and we go up this climb, This athlete was putting out 328 watts. Their FTP was 239 watts. So that's 137% of their threshold. That's like an anaerobic, really hard effort for 46 seconds that they did going up this climb, which is really hard when
Yeah.
you have racing left to do on this course. When we look at the next lap, it dropped down to 298. Forgive me, that's not the same climb. This is the same climb. When we look at that next one, it dropped down to 258. And then if we scroll ahead to the point where they do this one again, it dropped down to 243. And then if we scroll again, it dropped down to 216. So it's just really dropping really rapidly. Ruth, does anything come to mind when you look at like a power file like this and advice that you would have for the athlete? Because it definitely, this is not a negative split, right? A negative split would be like where the second half of the race is a bit faster. That is very uncommon in cyclocross. But it sure looks like this athlete was just losing their anaerobic capacity as they went on throughout this race. Do you have any thoughts or
Yeah.
observations on this?
I mean, for sure, I think, like, it does seem like they went out pretty hard. I think, like, one of the things that's really hard about cyclocross is that you, like, typically shorter hills, punchier stuff, and so, like, you wanna just go all out on these segments, and, like, that makes sense, but when you think about it in the long term, it's kind of like doing 30-30s in a way where if you go out too hard on the first one, by the last one, you're, like, really gonna be feeling it, whereas if you, like, just bring it down a little bit, like, you're going to, like, see kind of more of, like, an even split, and so I think you kind of have to think about it as, like, every hill, every time you have to get off and run your bike or anything like that, like, every time you even punch out of a corner, like, you're burning some sort of a match, and you only have, like, so much room in there, you know? And so I think, like, say this athlete started maybe more around, like, their threshold of VO2 max at these hills, like, they would see so much more benefit at the later half and, like, wouldn't be struggling so much to get up that hill, and so, I mean, I think it's hard because, like, the start of a cyclocross race, you're feeling fresh, like, you're probably trying to keep up with whoever's in the front, um, but you're, like, in the end, just gonna hurt yourself, and I also think you see, like, a lot of the best cyclocross races are road racers who don't really have, like, that, like, super anaerobic punch normally, like, normally they are more, like, threshold, even VO2, like, they're out there for, like, these long climbs, and they're the same athletes, and so I think that, like, also is something to say, like, you really just, like, have to keep it consistent if you want to make it to the end
Mm-hmm.
of these, like, races.
Yeah. It's worth noting, those are great tips, Ruth. It's worth noting too, this athlete with a 239 FTP, like you're with a Cat 4 field, but sometimes you go out with those fields and they just start so hard.
Mhm.
And if you have an FTP of 239, that's going to be really tough to be able to like
Super
hold
tough.
that power, and because it's just going to be over your threshold to stay with a field. So,
I
with that
also think
said, like,
chances are sorry, you go.
yeah, no, no,
Chances are
no,
with
keep
that
going.
field, like, a lot of them might not be great at pacing too, so if you can kind of keep it steadier at the beginning and be smarter than them, like, chances are a lot of them have a very similar, like, power profile to this, and, like, you'll be catching them in the later half if you can, like, just take it down a notch at the beginning.
That was exactly the point I was going to make,
Okay.
Ruth. Like, and with this athlete too, of having like a lower threshold, you kind of have to make that your plan because otherwise, and when I say is like a lower threshold, I mean, relatively speaking, I bet there's certain athletes in that field, if it's like a male field, which I think it is in this case, if it's like a male field and then you're dealing with athletes probably up to like 300 watt FTPs. Sure, they may have like a power to weight ratio that may not be as good as yours, but with cyclocross, raw power really matters because you're
Mhm.
pushing through grass or sand and all these areas that just require you to put out a huge amount of power. If you have a lower threshold, that really hurts you when you have to put out that much power to stay with those riders. So it's much more wise to follow Ruth's advice of making sure that you're tempering your efforts. You're trying to cut down on the amplitude. Like, visual learners, a great way to look at this is if we look at like the first half of this race, we can see that there are some really high spikes where they stayed above that threshold. But then if we look at the second half of the race, those are cut way down. And the reason they're cut way down is because they don't have the capacity to do it. But if you had intentionally kept those peaks lower, then chances are you wouldn't have had so many valleys that were this low in between, and you'd be able to carry so much more speed. Let's look at a good example of a race they did. Now, my estimation is maybe it was muddy in this race. I'm not entirely sure. But sometimes in a phenomenon that I see with cyclists when they do cyclocross races that are muddy, they're like, I just felt so good though. I can't believe it. The conditions are terrible, but I felt so good at the end of that race. And it's usually because you can't press as hard as you would. You can't lean into the climbs because you're traction limited. So they end up putting out more stable power and they don't end up putting out such high peaks. And suddenly they're at the end of the race and they're like, I did great. I don't know why I felt so good. It's like, well, you didn't blow yourself up. Because this one, if we look at it just from the onset, the reason that I think it was probably muddy is they have so much time in active recovery at 30.9% here. But, and I could be wrong, so let us know, but only 12.7% in anaerobic. So that's like a marked change. And if we look at first half to second half, like we look at roughly the first 20-ish minutes of this race, and again, it's around a 40-minute race, or I guess in this one, close to a 50-minute race, you still had only 15% anaerobic. And then if we look at the second half of the race, you had 10% anaerobic. So yes, it dropped, but it wasn't profound. And if we look at average power and normalized power for the first half of this race, you were roughly right around 177 normalized power. And then if we look at the second half of the race, you're at 170. So it's really not a big drop off, a 7-watt drop in this race. So this is an example of one that's much more tempered, but there is a lot of noise still within this. And sometimes that's course dependent, like you're constantly coasting into a lot of turns. And if we look at like the course profile on this one, it is quite turny. If we follow the dot through this course, there's a lot of spots where you're probably having to coast and ease off. But with that being said, they definitely kept the amplitude lower, right? They didn't blow themselves up quite as much because they were able to maintain a whole lot of that performance at the rest of the race. It's kind of a good example of it.
Yeah, no, that looks great.
If we look at like, this is a race that I did recently, and when we look at this one and we split it up, this is a cyclocross race. 272 NP for the first half, and then the second half was 257. So I dropped off a whole lot more than this athlete. And if you look at this also, you look at the time that I spent at like the normalized power, at anaerobic, I was at 25%, but you can see that the spread, I have 15% VO2 max and 11% threshold, and I have less in this endurance area than that athlete did. Decent amount in active recovery because of coasting in and out of turns. But then it definitely ramps up more consistently from sweet spot going up. It's not just a shelf once you hit anaerobic. So the power was trying to be a bit more smooth. So that just shows you, though, power does drop. This athlete, the power files actually don't look, markedly different between the two races. So this one looks much better, more even pacing. So just makes like it's muddy all the time. And then hopefully that'll help. So, in this case, I do want to go into the rest of the questions, though, that this athlete had, Ruth, and we can kind of go into, and actually maybe before we do that, let's look at their training calendar to kind of look at the periodization, because I think there's some stuff that we can learn from that part too. So I'm going to go back to their calendar. This athlete, you can see the name of their training plan is the Cyclocross Comeback Tour, which is awesome. Yeah, great job. And like they said, they took a long break for years, and then they came back to training. I just want to applaud this athlete on being like pretty darn consistent. You might be able to see on the screen here the dark green. That means that was like a planned, structured workout. And then light green, like you see through here, is unplanned, like riding, or it's unstructured riding. So it isn't like a workout, it's just riding. And this athlete was largely like very, very good with sticking to a plan, which is really good to see. All these red dots are races that they had. And you can see once the racing increases, they have more stress coming from racing, non-structured work, which is totally to be expected. So that's what we see there. And we see this athlete getting to the point where they were roughly somewhere around 300, like 250 to 350 for their 6-week rolling average TSS. And we look back historically, and that's more or less at the top of what this athlete has ever carried chronically. So the athlete's doing a good job and meeting themselves where they're at with the training plans, meeting them where they're at, and it's making the most of what they have. All that said, there's kind of a big red flag here that I see. So this is a long cyclocross season. You're racing from August, and then you're racing all the way through to December 6th is their last race that they have. And in this case, they put their A event on October 11th, which the tricky part about this is that you're still racing and still trying to hold on to form. And look at what we see as we get closer. So like there's not many yellow days on their calendar. And a yellow day means you're getting close to needing some sort of rest or recovery.
Mhm.
A red day is when you've really pushed it hard and you need a lot of recovery. Like this athlete, after one of the biggest weeks that they had, and they did a 3-hour ride that was like had some really properly hard efforts in it, and they got a red day thereafter, and they
Mhm.
needed to make sure that they rest. If you look at it, the yellow days become less frequent as they're going through this training, and it's looking really good. But then if we fast forward all the way up until what we're seeing like currently, you're going to start to see that their yellow days were increasing, and they're starting to get some like failed workouts, or they mentioned that it was just too intense, or there was training fatigue. And part of this is because on October 11th, they had their peak.
Mhm.
And then they're trying to drag this peak out for a long time, Ruth. So like their last race is December 6th. So they're going to try to drag this thing out like a full, like over like 8 weeks, basically. Um, do you have experience in this and managing like when you're like with XCO in particular? You guys can race a lot. Like,
Yeah.
how do you pick and choose when you want to peak? And then how do you manage your expectations for the races thereafter? And do you have like a hard rule, like after a peak, I'm not going to race for a bit to try to recover? How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, part of it for sure is, like, you have to, like, mentally set yourself up for, like, "Okay, this is my peak, and anything that happens after this, like, obviously it still matters, but, like, you've hit your peak." So that is the peak, and, like, you have to make sure you have, like, the dedicated rest after that. And so I think, like, obviously this person has been super consistent, and it seems like, built like a like, TrainerRoad is, like, a pretty great training plan for them. It seems um pretty dialed, but I do think, like, there is also the component of, like, you don't really get better, like, when you're training, you get better when you're resting after your training, and so, like, for this athlete, it seems like they could use, like, a break after they hit their peak in October, you know? I think for me,
Yeah.
like, with XCO stuff, there's it's I mean, it's tricky because obviously you wanna be, like, good at every race you do, but, like, realistically, that's just, like, not what you do, and so I think, like, in, like, the spring when, like, you're pretty early in the race season for XCO, you're racing a fair amount, trying to get those points, but it's, like, before you're going to any World Cups, so it's all domestic and, like, nationals isn't till July, you have World Cups all the way in October, kind of same situation, you really just have to, like, be be pretty consistent, but also, like, make sure you get your rest in. So I think, like, for me, when I would do it, it'd be like, "Okay, I'm going to Fayetteville, um, and I'm gonna race, like, 3 XCOs and 2 short tracks this week." And then it's like, "Okay, I'm gonna do, like, a big endurance day after that, and then I'm gonna, like, take a lot of time off." Um, and so I think it is just, like, really important to, like, make sure you get those rest days in, make sure you
Hmm.
also find kind of, like, a routine, some consistency, and just also be prepared to, like, not be your best when you're not in your peak. And I think that's,
Yeah.
like, hard because you always wanna see progress, but, um,
Yeah.
it's just not a possibility a lot of the time. Um
Yeah. I see this is great advice, Ruth, on making sure that you have a little space after this. And this is something that we always like are trying to add in more protections to kind of like help us from ourselves
Mhm.
because we just want to race all the time. One of the things that I'm seeing is that your plan has you training on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and it wants you to do like a very, or sorry, I'll be clear. Tuesday is a VO2 workout where they're at in their specialty phase right now. So they're like race prep, right? And
Mhm.
managing this in the competition phase. And they have a VO2 workout or an anaerobic workout, depending on where they're at in their plan, on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, it's like a super easy short endurance spin. And then after that, on Thursday, it has them going back to like a VO2 max workout. And then usually you have a race on the weekends, so you end up doing openers. But in most cases, what it wants to recommend is something that's going to be a bit more like steady state, lower intensity work. But because you're racing so much, what ends up happening is that instead of going hard, easy, hard, easy, hard, easy, you go hard, hard. Sometimes you ride Zwift and you go hard. And
Mhm.
then after that, you go hard because you do openers because then you have another race on Saturday and you go hard. And then on Sunday, sometimes you race again. And then sometimes you go hard again. So it's like 5 to 6 days of hard. And what I would recommend is when you have a race on your calendar, for that week, even if it's a C race, for cyclocross in particular, that takes the place of one of your hard workouts for the
Mhm.
week. You can't try to do it all. And after those races, it's a very good idea for most average athletes to have a day off or a very easy day. For higher end athletes, you'll see them maybe, like Ruth said, like stack on more endurance, like a bigger endurance day after that. But for most of us average folks, like we're just trying to recover from that hard race, and we need to give ourselves the time to recover thereafter. So I would make it so that if you are going to race on Wednesdays, that you shift your training plan so then like you don't end up doing a really hard ride on Tuesday. Instead, Tuesday is just going to be an easier day that you do, and you swap it around in your calendar. You can swap that easy day over, swap the hard day, and you can change up your schedule. So then that way you don't just find yourself doing nonstop intensity, because the plan isn't necessarily calling for that. And what you're doing is on the easy days, you're filling it in with harder stuff. And that's why it's starting to give you like yellow days and spots, and that's increasing. And then that's why you're struggling with like actually nailing your marks in your workouts. And it gets a lot tougher. So I think that it's also, don't be afraid of taking a day off when
Yeah.
you feel like it's really hard and you're starting to get tired, Ruth. Do you
And
agree?
I also think, like, kind of the point of your training is so that you're good in the race. And so if you're going out and, like, you're worried about your training the day before your race, like, you're just not you're not focusing on the right thing. Like, you should be focused on performing in your race the next day, and, like, chances are that this race is gonna be harder than your, like, training or your intervals, like, that you're gonna do in a more quality session, like, as a race, and you're going to get that fitness. Um, but, like, there's no point in, like, kind of sabotaging yourself and, like, going out and doing, like, an interval set, like, even within 2 days of a race if it's, like, your important race, obviously. Um, and so I think just, like, keep that in mind as, like, you're training to race, so don't train and ruin your race.
Yeah, well said. This is another thing too, Ruth, for athletes listening to this. Uh, I let me recap this, then move on to that point. The recaps here. If you're gonna have a peak for a race, like you want to make sure that you have a week after that peak to be able to drop down and recover. And then typically, if you're gonna have more racing thereafter, I would recommend timing that peak so that if you're in the middle of if you have a long series, and barring any like specific race that you know you're going to do really well at because of a nature of the course or something, I would always plan to have your peak be within the final 2 to 3 weeks of the season. So if you're racing every week, then you can race your strongest on the third to the last round or something. Because stretching a peak past 3 weeks gets really tough, and then you can't count on performance to actually do well. So like if it is a series, usually the best recommendation is that within the final 3 weeks, that's when you have your peak, because then that'll allow you to build up steadily to that point. So it's not like you're having terrible performance before then. No, you're building up and you're just getting better and better and better. And then that way, from then to the final 3 weeks, more or less, you can probably count on good performance. After 3 weeks, like it's just a roll of the dice and it's going to be really tough. And then separately stack, like make sure that you are not making your easy days hard with races and other things. If you have a race on the calendar, swap that out with one of your intentionally hard workouts. So those are the recommendations I'd have there. But this athlete asked some specific questions, and I think it's interesting, specifically with you, Ruth. They say that they think it might take some more time for them to build the needed endurance to be able to hang on for the whole race. And then they say, can you tell me if this is so, and what exactly happens to the body for me to be able to get there? When we look at this athlete's like file, and if their FTP is 239, and then for the first 20 minutes of the race, their average power, their normalized powers are like right there around 239 for 20 minutes. But the vast majority of that has come from them punching way over their threshold. That's just, we say better endurance, but in the end, like having an increased threshold is just going to make that easier. Do you find that being advantageous? Because you, relatively speaking, have a higher FTP than a lot of the athletes that you might be racing against. And do you find that to be beneficial, or do you use that higher FTP in specific ways?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, I think the biggest thing that I've, like, learned over mostly through XCO is, like, any time that you're using more energy than you need to, like, you're kind of doing something wrong. And so even, like, with, like, a high FTP, I think it's really important that, like, especially I think cyclocross is a great example of this, like, you spend, like, as little energy possible, like, dismounting, going over the barriers, going up this hill, like punch as like little as you need, unless like you are the strongest one in the race, and then obviously use that to your advantage. And like then like having the high FTP is super helpful because you can kind of like attack these zones and make those people that actually do have to kind of like, you know, like count out their matches and make sure they like aren't using too many, like suffer on like that kind of thing. So I think there's kind of like a mix, but like I think most importantly, especially if you do have like that kind of lower FTP in that range, like it's just so important to stay consistent in the race and like use as little power as possible. And like I actually like I was talking to my coach about this like in road racing. Like they like her and her team used to have a competition of like who would finish the race with like the lowest normalized power. Which means like they did the least amount of work in their race, like and like still finish in like the same group, you know? So I do think like that is like if you have like that lower FTP, like that's super important to have. Like just kind of like race smart.
Yeah, great advice. And if you're consistent with your training like you are, I think that if you take a short off season after these races and it looks like you already have a training plan built on your calendar thereafter, it's probably going to recommend like your training volume is around the same right now, but then I would check within the first 6 weeks. I would use the check volume function. Like you click on your training plan and hit check volume. I guarantee you it's going to suggest that it ramps up for you. And when that training volume ramps up, that's going to be giving you that additional endurance you need. It's an interesting question of like, I think I need more endurance to be able to support the rest of this. And because it's absolutely true, you do. But we don't necessarily just get more endurance by riding more low zone 2 or riding anything like that. It's all aerobic. And if you can just raise your aerobic thresholds upward, then that's going to help. And if you can get to the point where that bumps your anaerobic threshold upward, that's going to help like a huge amount. Because what was once anaerobic suddenly becomes aerobic. And then what was once, something that was moderately challenging just becomes you not even thinking about it. It's nice and easy for you. But that just comes through consistent training. And training. When you're consistent with a solid training plan, your threshold will be going up within reason until you hit physiological limits of what you can recover from. And then at that point, if you're bumping up against physiological limits, you're probably not writing in questions asking about how you can do this stuff. And instead, you're writing in questions like, how do I get a pro contract or something? So very different set of questions. So I think you're doing a great job. Now, what exactly happens in your body in order for you to get there? It's all progressive overload and adaptation. So you dose your body with slightly more than what it's capable of, and it sends a signal to your body that says, hey, we need to get better. That was really hard. And then your body says, okay, I'll get better. You give it a little bit of time to recover, and then it comes back and it allows you to get faster. So, and it's very basic. Many times we think that we're missing a very specific aspect of fitness, but usually the answer for everything is you just need more aerobic fitness, which sounds like a higher FTP in most cases. So hopefully that gives you some good guidance on that one. This next question is perfect for you, Ruth. Federico says, thank you for a great weekly podcast. I'm a university student trying to balance training and struggling with this. Could you help me with suggestions to not miss workouts while enduring heavy load from classes that might be changing from day to day? This is you and your partner, Liam. You've been in the thick of this for years.
Yeah.
And you in particular, Ruth. How do you balance it all?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like the question of the like past 4 years for me. So this is like just perfect. I mean, I think for one, the thing I've learned is that it's never going to be perfect at this stage. Like there's just no way that if you're really fully immersed in what you're studying, and also it's kind of the first time in your life you have to cook for yourself and go to the store and do all that. And then also you're trying to train as an athlete, fuel as an athlete, recover as an athlete. There's just not a way to do all of those things. And so I think the biggest thing that I try and focus on is just overall consistency. So okay, I have 6 workouts this week or 6 rides. Maybe I get 3 or 4 of them really good because I have less stuff to do those days. And then those other days that oh my God, I have so much. It's just I get out, I do it. It might not be perfect. So I think the number one thing is you really have to be kind of patient with yourself and just God, maybe you have so much to do. Maybe you just really don't have the time, but you just kind of get out and do it. So I think just consistency. And like I really struggled with that in the past of like, oh my gosh, I have 3 midterms this week. Like, what am I gonna do? Like, I'm in the peak of base season. I'm supposed to be out for 4 hours. Like, sometimes you just like get out and do 2 hours. And so maybe your week is like, 16 hours instead of 18 or 13 instead of 15, but you still like got out and like put in kind of some time. So I think that's super important. Um, and then I also think your overall mental health is really important. So maybe there is a situation where like you just don't have the time that week, and that is also totally okay. I think I've had a lot of those. And there's also like really no point in like if you're like really stressed and like then you try and go out and like do the 4-hour ride, that's not going to be good for you. Like you're probably going to get sick. Um and so I think it is just like an overall like really listen to your body, be patient, get in what works. I think for me, what's been super helpful, is also the strength training element. Like maybe there's some days where like you don't get out of class until like 5 p.m. and it's dark, or you like have class all day, but you could go like early in the morning to the gym. Um, and I think that's like a piece that is like sometimes slept on by people of like, wow, like strength, at least for me, makes such a huge difference. And it's something that takes like 45 minutes to an hour, and you can do it whether it's light outside or dark outside or raining or like whatever. And so I think finding other ways to like help make yourself better that aren't just like going out for these long rides when you like really don't have time for a long ride.
Yeah, being okay with it not being perfect
Mhm.
really resonates too. And Federico, sometimes I think that athletes are like, how can I be professional as a cyclist? How can I be, which it's Ruth's job. So it's a bit more complicated for Ruth, but how can I be a professional cyclist? How can I be the best student possible when it's like, okay, let's step back and prioritize. One of these things has to give. You can't do it all, and it's okay if something gives for a while. And you learning to be efficient and dedicated within the realm that you have and can control right now will just pay dividends when in the future you do have more time. It'll make it so that you're extra efficient with what you have.
And I also think like for me, and like my coach has like really tried to nail this into me, like cycling should be something that is kind of like almost an escape from school and something that's like a stress reliever. And so if it's becoming something that's like more stressful than a stress reliever, like it's probably time for you to like take some time, like get your on top of your studies and then like maybe get back into a routine. But if it isn't your job and like you're just like training, like you have some goals, like at the end of the day, it's supposed to be fun, and like exercise is supposed to be something that you like enjoy and is like helping you. And so definitely just like take that time and like make sure it's something that's like benefiting you, not like making things harder for you.
Good advice for all of us, not just students. Adam's question. Adam says, hey, could you guys explain how to go about torque training? The zones you recommend, what cadence, and most importantly, how you'd recommend doing progressive overload with it. And then they basically run through a few different examples. So this is something that for years now we've had it in the in-workout instructions that you see pop up on the screen, where we try to get athletes to experiment with lower cadences and spend some time doing that because there is like so much benefit to this. Is this something that you do as well, Ruth, where you have sessions where a goal is you're doing the power, but at the same time your goal is to do the power at a lower cadence?
Yeah, I think in the winter, like multiple times a week, I'm doing the like low cadence, consistent, or even higher power torque workout. So
Yeah. What sort of zone are you staying in with power, usually with those sort of workouts? And then what sort of cadence are you running?
yeah, I'm normally I am already kind of a masher on the pedals, so I'm normally running like a 60 to 65 cadence, and kind of like a high tempo to sweet spot for my power typically.
Yeah, this is probably the best place to do it with the zone. I've seen people do like very high intensity with low cadence, and while that can benefit, I think you're kind of crossing some signals and maybe not getting the best out of both worlds. Like one good way, so I think that across the board, our recommendation is to do as Ruth is talking about here, with like the best spot is sweet spot style work and like tempo style work. And usually we're going to recommend somebody be between like 55 to 70 RPM, somewhere within there. But in some cases, an athlete might be 50 to 60, somewhere like a lot lower. It just really depends on what you're used to. But then when you're talking about higher intensity, I think the more productive way to do that is, and you'll see this in some of the workout instructions too, depending on the workouts, but you can start in a hard gear with like your high intensity efforts and then get to the point where you're spinning more quickly later on. And maybe that can have some specific benefit, but you're probably not building strength endurance, which basically is like, the whole goal of doing these low cadence efforts is to fatigue, number one, cause like time under significant tension without any sort of relief. And what that does is that sends a really strong stimulus. So it exhausts fast twitch fibers more quickly, exhausts anaerobic stores a bit more quickly than you would use. And then as a result, it's basically saying like, hey, anaerobic side, maybe you want to be a bit more aerobic and more efficient. And that fiber type recomposition happens. And it's like, and all of you aerobic fibers, you need to be extra efficient because this is a lot of strain and we need to figure out how to maintain this load for this long without having any break. When it does that, then your body gets better at being able to manage that. And then it makes the other efforts a whole lot easier to sustain, even higher intensity efforts. It makes it feel much easier to sustain because your muscles are used to this like time under tension without any sort of relief for a long time. So that's like the goal that you're going for. So when you talk about pairing it with higher intensity work, chances are that's probably just like making it so that you can't do the high intensity work quite to the quality that you want. Whereas with sweet spot, you totally can do it. So it's better, I think, to separate those two.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think the only kind of high intensity I ever add is like sometimes like at the end I'll add like a 30-second rev up. So you take that hard gear that you're in and you just like torque it as hard as you can for 30 seconds to try and like get your cadence up, add a little bit to the end. But like that's I feel like maybe one in every few workouts I add that at the end. But for the most part, yeah, I agree. Like just that sweet spot tempo zone is kind of like all you need for that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's probably some specific circumstances where if you know, for example, that you're just going to be ground down to a halt and doing like VO2 style stuff, but at a really low cadence for a race, it's
Mhm.
probably worth you, figuring that out and then implementing that into your training with your shorter stuff. But still, you just have to make sure that it doesn't compromise your ability to hold your power targets because that is what like is most important, that you can do the power. How you do the power is a bit different, and that's why that's like a specificity play, whereas when we're talking about this strength endurance play that you're working on, this is very different. This is making you more aerobically efficient to be able to support like a broad, it's firming up the base so you can build higher later on. So yeah, that's what I would say. It's cool to hear that you do it. It's really beneficial work. If you have tempo or sweet spot intervals on your calendar, experiment with it, but don't just drop down to like 50 because chances are it's going to be really hard,
Mhm.
especially if you're on a smart trainer, because a lot of smart trainers, if you drop your cadence too low, it likes to drag you even lower down to a halt, and it gets really hard to escape the grasp of the smart trainer. So you'll have to work your way down over time. And maybe don't do it for an entire interval at first or an entire workout for certain, but like pick one interval or maybe alternate intervals or split them up. Do 5 minutes at a low cadence and then 5 minutes at a higher cadence. Like you don't have to take an absolute approach by just dropping it all down. Okay, Jesse's question. This will be the last one. Jesse says, "I'm not fast, but I'm less not fast than I used to be." He says, "Hat tip to TrainerRoad." That's awesome. They say, "But even as I wind up right at the meat of the TrainerRoad, I think they're talking about they're in the middle of the bell curve. They feel like they're so worried about doing race distances that they're scared to warm up properly." So I think that what they're saying here is that they're worried about their race being compromised by their warm up. And they're wondering, if I do my warm up, aren't I exhausting a finite amount of resources? And as a result, maybe I won't be able to do as well in my race. They mentioned the fact that they race occasionally, mostly mountain bike and cyclocross, and it feels like burning a match from a small matchbox, to be making significant efforts that don't get me closer to the finish line is useless. So they're saying they're probably just underscoring their own confusion, but they often find that workouts that actually, I'm just going to skip that part, and then we're going to skip through the rest, and we're just going to make it clear. This athlete, Ruth, worried about warm-ups, burning some of the matches, and compromising their ability to perform in the race. What advice do you have for this athlete in this regard? Because you've done a lot of races that you probably have different warm-up protocols for, I would assume. Something like
Mhm.
a Unbound or a Leadville would probably be very different than when you do a short track.
Yeah, I think, that also is, like, a huge thing that, like, my coach and I have worked on throughout the years of, like, perfecting the warm-up. I think I think it is really common for people to over warm up. I think it's super easy to do, especially if it's hot outside, like, super easy to over warm up. So I think, like, my warm up for, say, for, like, an XCO race or a cyclocross race is normally I think it's, like, 20 to 25 minutes. It's a lot of time of just spinning. I do, like, a little time and tempo and, like, maybe 2 minutes at, like, a low threshold, super low threshold. Um, and then I do, like, a couple, like, high cadence spin-ups, and that is, like, all that I touch in my warm-up. And so then it's, like, you're getting everything warmed up, but you're not necessarily burning that match that you were talking about. Um, I think it's, like, really important to look at the race that you're doing for a warm-up. So, like, for Leadville, for say, or, like, Unbound, like, I just, like, rode to the start line, maybe did a couple tiny little spin-ups, but the first part of the race is most likely gonna be the warm-up for you, so in that type of thing, you don't really need a warm-up. And also when it's hot outside, like, normally I just spin around for a little bit because, like, you're getting pretty warm already. So, yeah, I mean, I think if you are finishing your warm up and you are feeling like, "Oh, wow, I went pretty hard in my warm up," you probably went too hard in your warm up, and you should just, like, kind of maybe keep, like, the 20 to 30 minutes is a really good range for warm up, I think. But you're probably, like, doing whatever efforts in your warm up a little too hard would be my guess.
Yeah, it's interesting because quite literally you do warm up.
Yeah.
Like your core gets warm and your body temp
Mhm.
gets warm and that can impede performance. So
Mhm.
you don't want to get too actually warm from doing it. Like the whole point of a warm up, right, is just to make sure that number one, you're getting sufficient circulation and activating the neural pathways that you have to your muscles so that you're using all of your muscles, not just a portion of your muscle fibers, but everything is firing. Like that's really all the goal is. Now, psychologically speaking, there's probably something to be said for getting you used to some sort of like a hard effort to some degree.
Mhm.
Kind of like Ruth said, like riding around that just enough time around like low threshold and then with some spin ups. So then like it doesn't come as a complete shock to the system. Like psychologically, you're ready for what that might feel like. But anything beyond that's probably excessive. I also agree that I think athletes over warm up. Now, in this case, this athlete's looking at like 20 to 30-minute warm ups, and they're saying they're worried that it's too much. And these aren't like excessively complicated warm ups. I'm going to put some on screen right now, but some of the workouts that we have marked as warm up in our profile, like Rogers. There's another one that you can look at called Para that might be good for like shorter stuff. Another one called Laurel or Cajon that might be something that's like a really stable one. So we'll put all those on screen, but these are all within like the 20 to 30-minute range. And they have you just like slowly, like you're starting off with just easy riding. And then after that, you might go up toward the point of doing tempo-ish sort of work. And then you drop back down. And depending on if you have a short race, it's going to prescribe one that's going to be like shorter, harder things, but they're going to be very short in duration. And if it's like a steady state style race, it might give you more steady state tempo-ish effort, sweet spot effort. And you do that for, I don't know, anywhere from like 3 to 5 minutes max. And then after
Mhm.
that, cool down and you go easy. So the whole concept of burning a match, if you are going crazy during a warm up, you probably are burning matches
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
it's
I
not
mean,
a
I
good
think just,
idea.
like, if you are doing those warm-ups, like, be very conscious of your zones. Like, it's easy to look at it and be like, "Oh, hard for 2 minutes," but it's not that hard. It is, like, a low threshold kind of hard. So,
Yeah.
um
And also like you should fuel during your warm up and your
Mhm.
body, chances are if you're following a structured plan, you're capable of doing a 20-minute warm up and as long as it isn't a crazy warm up, you'll be fine. It's not like you're burning some sort of a match.
Mhm.
Um there is like this fear that I see a lot of athletes have that like any kilojoules that go into the pedals, that's like kilojoules that I could have used during the race. And I guess like in theory, you're correct if it's a really long and exhaustive event. But at the same time, you also have to look at your performance potential and how a warm up would help you in the beginning. So there is no perfect sanitary, clean way to be able to handle this perfectly. Yes, in theory, you are probably using up some energy you could use in your race. But if you aren't ready to perform, then chances are your performance is actually going to be worse if you didn't have any chance to warm up. So, but again, it's super flexible. In some cases, there are no like for Leadville, for me, being an amateur, there's zero reason to warm up.
Mhm.
Because for me, like I'm just going to go off, roll with the group, and then I'm just going to be sticking below threshold for that day. So I don't need to worry about anything. And I'm going to save
Mhm.
every kilojoule I have for that really long day. Whereas Ruth might actually have to be making moves in the beginning of the race. I'm not having to, so I don't care about the warm up in that case. But something like Little Sugar, for example, like I knew it was going to start so extremely hard that I really had to make sure that I was primed and ready. And I had
Mhm.
done some efforts that were going to be hard efforts that were short. We're talking nothing longer than a minute. I think the longest effort that I did was 45 seconds before that, but it was like I did a 15, a 30, and a 45. And that was after riding at tempo for a little bit. And then that was what I needed to do just to be warmed up for that one. That was plenty of rest in between those
Mhm.
ones too. It wasn't like I was stacking it. So yeah, point is, uh, don't worry about burning a match if you're following a structured workout or structured warm up that's going to be under 20 minutes. There's tons of them to pick from TrainerRoad,
I
and
also
it'll probably
think,
be pretty
like,
easy.
don't be scared to kind of experiment a little bit and figure out, like, kind of what works for you. Like, I experimented for, like, a couple years, honestly, to kind of, like, figure out exactly what I needed. Every time I do it, I'd put a note in, like, my Training Peaks afterward and just be like, "Oh, I felt a little under warmed up," or "This felt good," or "I got too hot." But yeah, I mean, I think, like, overall guidelines, like, keep it 20 to 30 minutes, don't go too hard, look at the course, see what kind of course you have going, but, yeah, don't be afraid to, like, get a warm up in because it will help you.
hmm personally speaking, I followed a Dunning-Kruger curve for this one,
Mhm.
where like I started out and it was just like, just ride your bike. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
at one point I was like, oh my gosh, I have to measure every kilojoule. I have to make sure it's absolutely perfect. And now I'm
Mhm.
kind of back to almost like just ride your bike,
Yeah.
like because you experiment with it and you'll go through that process and you'll figure out what works for you. Then after that,
Mhm.
you can really just kind of that allows you to be flexible and you still know what boxes you need to check. Like,
Mhm.
and you'll know when you feel warmed up. But
It
it's
teaches you how to,
definitely
like, learn yourself too of, like, "Oh, I'm warm, I'm ready."
that's right. And if anything for me, it's more about being like psychologically ready, I've found is like what I really need. And that's why having that process that's consistent can be really helpful.
For
So like
sure.
the process Ruth is talking about, taking notes and observations and then applying them on the next one, that can really help you kind of refine your process there. And for me, I've gotten away from now having anything that's too rigid and it feels really liberating because I feel like I just know when I'm warmed up now. But chances are the answer is not more. like I think a lot of athletes think that like I just wasn't warmed up enough, but in many cases I see they're actually a little too warmed up and they just
Mhm.
are cooked. So Ruth, thanks for joining us. I appreciate this. For those that want to get in touch with Ruth, follow Ruth, support Ruth, I'm going to put a link down to her Instagram down below. She races for the Santa Cruz Hit Squad. She also is going to be in the Lifetime Grand Prix next year, which is exciting. As the winner of last year's U23, it's going to be great to see her in there. Are you excited to do 200 miles at Unbound, Ruth?
Yeah, my favorite course. I'm super excited.
so, so if you're at Unbound, make sure you give her plenty of cheers.
Yeah, please,
so,
I'll need
yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly. Thanks a bunch, Ruth. We appreciate it. If you have questions for this podcast or for the guests on it, you can submit them down below in the YouTube comments or the Spotify comments, or you can submit them at trainerroad.com/podcast. And if you're listening to this and you want to help out TrainerRoad in any way, this is a free podcast that we give out to everybody. We would love it if you, number one, went and tried TrainerRoad to see if it makes you faster like it does athletes all around the world. But also you can just rate the podcast. It's on a rolling average, basically, the rating. So if we consistently rate the podcast, it will be consistently recommended to people, and then we'll help more people get faster. That's all our goal is. So you can go and do that, rate it on Spotify, or you can subscribe on the YouTube channel and like the videos there. But that would be a huge help. We'll talk to you all next week. Thanks, everybody.